Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking about episode 20 of season 2 of Young Justice called Endgame. And really fitting title as this is the final episode of the series. Now the folks behind the show said that they deliberately left a few plot threads hanging here and there on the chance that they might be able to bring the show back someday. I certainly would like to see the show return, but I'm not holding my breath, okay? Stranger things have happened, but anyway, let's just kind of get right into what we have to work with here. The wrap up of the trial with the Justice League, honestly, I felt that was really pretty flat. It just really, to me, just wasn't interesting. And they tried to spice it up a little bit by having the judges be crooked and basically kind of hint like, you're going to need to give us a bribe in order for us to overturn this verdict. And, Miss Martian and Superboy throw out some BS. And really, it just wasn't interesting. The only real payoff to that scene was seeing Warworld appear in the skies, and really Vandal Savage's declaration to the galaxy that anybody who screws with Earth would answer to them. So that was a nice payoff, but the whole thing with the Justice League being on trial, as I said, it just really sputtered out there towards the end, and I can't say that I'm very happy with how that went. We also come to the conclusion of Blue Beetle's story here. He's found equilibrium with the beetle, the scarab, I should say. The scarab even refers to them as brothers, hermanos, which I have to say was really kind of a nice callback. He sort of shows that he's picked up a little bit of Jaime's way of speaking. And here, having Blue Beetle incorporate a little bit of Spanish into what he says, it really does enhance the story, rather than when he was first introduced and he seemed to do it enough just to sort of remind us that he was Hispanic. So on that level, the show has really done pretty well. His big fight with Black Beetle, because ultimately it did have to be Blue Beetle who took him down. Just the demands of drama required that. I thought that was reasonably well done. A little bit predictable, but predictable isn't necessarily bad so long as it's well executed. And this is a reason. Again, it's also reasonably well executed. I got no real complaints about that scene. So let's see here. We also get to see, classic stuff of the Light and the Justice League teaming up to save the world from the Reach's doomsday plan. And I always sort of like these moments. Well, actually, it wasn't really the Light; it was mostly Lex Luthor. But okay, we'll kind of talk about Lex a little bit more later. I always sort of like these stories because, as is pointed out, this is Lex's world too. I'm reminded of the really nice story from Justice League Unlimited, where both the Justice League and the Legion of Doom kind of had to band together to save the world, which was pretty awesome, and a really nice way for that series to end on. But anyway, moving on. One thing that sort of surprised me this episode, and why not take a moment to talk about the relationship stuff, I guess, was was Superboy mentioning that Wendy and Marvin were dating. If you're familiar with the old Super Friends cartoon or just the comics, Wendy and Marvin are brother and sister, so I can't say I'm really behind that idea. It really seems just ew. Here in this continuity, they're not brother and sister. This isn't Ultimate Scarlet Witch and Ultimate Quicksilver from the Marvel comics or anything like that. But still, that's I think that's not going to go over so well with older fans like myself. So. And of course, they've already sort of start dropping some pretty serious hints that Miss Martian and Superboy are going to get back together. The whole life is short thing that Tim and Cassie have gotten together, all very much going in that direction. And, it is actually sort of true. In the comics, Tim and Cassie did at least have a mutual attraction, and they kissed a little bit after Superboy had died in the comics. I mean, he wasn't dead for a super long time, and it really was ultimately established that it was really just more kind of a grieving thing with a little bit of vaguely underlying attraction there. At least that's how I interpreted it. It's been a long time since I read those stories, so my memory of them isn't the best. But I always thought that was a reasonable pairing. Something that really could work. Although if you really had to put a gun to my head and say which I prefer, I have to say I did like Connor and Cassie together better. But they don't share that sort of relationship here on the show, and also on the show, Wonder Girl is 14, so yeah. Anyway, let's see. In terms of relationship, we also, not a romantic relationship, but we also get to see a little bit of Lagan and Aqualad kind of butting heads. And, in true Lagan fashion, he has to bring this up at the most horribly, horribly inappropriate moment possible. But, in true Aqualad fashion, he's able to, with just a few words, allay Lagoon Boy's fears, and I chose you as my replacement on the team for a reason, and that shows that I trust you. So right there, that's a very quick and effective way that is 100% in character of repairing the relationship between Aqualad and Lagoon Boy. Now, I'm honestly surprised they even took a little bit of time to do that, because it really hadn't crossed my mind that that would be something that would really need to be addressed. But stopping and thinking back on it, yeah, it would make sense that Lagoon Boy would feel particularly betrayed, because, again, as I said, he was the one who was brought in to replace Aqualad. He felt, had shown a lot of trust in him. So him sort of apparently betraying the team and then finding out that no, it was all a lie. Yeah, Lagoon Boy would seriously feel betrayed here, or at least upset to a degree. And this kind of goes back to some of the stuff I talked about in my last review, where we had talked about how Lagoon Boy had been developed as a character over the course of this season. And I stand by my statement that they did a reasonably good job with this guy. I think if he'd been portrayed like this in at least the handful of stories that I'd read where he had appeared, I'd be much more interested in the character in the comics. But, c'est la vie, right? Let me see here. Oh, yes, of course we can't forget to talk about Static. Virgil has 100%, he's officially joined the team. He's taken the codename of Static, and it's even hinted that Black Lightning will be acting as a mentor towards him. This is all extremely fitting, because Static was always, when he was created by the late and sorely missed Dwayne McDuffie, he was always, from the start, very obviously a bit of a riff on Black Lightning. But, there's nothing wrong with doing a character who's essentially a riff on another one, so long as you make them unique and interesting in their own right. And in that, Static succeeded very admirably. I mean, he's done a lot of great stuff in the comics. He had some nice stuff on Batman Beyond. He had his own TV show. I mean, Static is an extremely solid character, and it was nice to see a moment that really paid homage to his spiritual roots as a character, shall we say. Let me see here. Sorry, I'm trying to read my own notes. I'd say I should try and improve my own handwriting, but my handwriting's been pretty crap ever since the 3rd grade, so at this point I think it's a lost cause. Okay, we're just gonna have to skip that. Okay, anyway, moving on. Also, in true superhero comic fashion, the heroes do save the day at the climax of the big mega story arc. But, if this was a comic book, there would be "Someone Dies This Issue" written on the cover. And, that is what tends to happen in superhero comics when these sort of things happen. Of course, as is often said, in comics, death is cheap. And the one who ends up paying the price this time around is Wally. And it's actually supremely ironic the way he goes out. It's extraordinarily reminiscent of the way that Barry Allen died in Crisis on Infinite Earth. He literally ran until he, actually kind of crumbled to dust. Here, Wally does something similar. He just sort of vanishes in kind of a light, which was obviously intended to be some kind of a thread where they would bring him back in the third season. Things like this involving speedsters, being sent through time or into alternate dimensions or into the Speed Force. It's old stuff over in the Flash comics, but the aftermath was portrayed very well. Artemis going to Wally's parents to kind of comfort and share their grief. It's also said that what happened to Tim, this inspired Tim and Cassie to get together, and I realized what it is that that was on my notes that I was trying to read. And of course, we ultimately leads us into seeing what the little garden to the fallen heroes up at the Watchtower. Now, this is something that there's a version of that in Titan's Tower in the comics, and if you read carefully some old Justice League issues, you see that somewhere in New Jersey there's actually a cemetery where the superheroes kind of bury their own, or at least put up graves to them. And honestly, I always liked the kind of the memorial to the fallen heroes in the Teen Titans comics. I always thought that was a very nice touch. We see Tula there very briefly, touching on some things that have been seen over the course of the season. So I do, as I said, I really like that they incorporated that element. It's just something I've always enjoyed here. Let me see here. This, of course, sort of brings us to our what the villains are up to this time, who are not the Reach. And it seems as if the Light has made some sort of an alliance with none other than Darkseid, which is awesome. I kind of wondered previously if we might be seeing Darkseid this season, if he was going to turn out to be the big bad of this season, before it was revealed that it was ultimately the Reach who were behind everything. And oh man, this really just makes me wish that there was a third season, because I love Darkseid. If you've watched the 90s Superman the animated series, you saw really some of Darkseid's absolute finest. His invasion of Metropolis and the absolutely epic beatdown that Superman ultimately gives him. It's just, I mean, seriously, that Superman versus Darkseid fight, the way it comes to a conclusion, is, to me, along with Superman's World of Cardboard speech, is just an absolute joy for any superhero fan. I sometimes, when I'm in a down mood, look up that clip and watch it again, because it's just so satisfying. So the idea that we might have been able to see something like that, and almost certainly won't, it's extraordinarily disappointing. And of course, during that scene, we see G. Gordon Godfrey there on Apocalypse, which of course does heavily imply that he is just not some Earth human who's been called up by Lex Luthor, that he's in fact the guy from Apocalypse, Glorious Godfrey, sent to Earth under a phony name, which is kind of what they just tend to do with Glorious Godfrey. It's his shtick. He's Darkseid's propaganda minister, and of course this leads into him bolstering Lex Luthor for the new Secretary General of the United Nations. Again, something that's very reminiscent of the comics from 12 years ago, where Lex Luthor was elected President of the United States. In fact, we even saw that touched on in the series finale of Smallville. And oh yes, yes, I almost forgot to mention one thing. It's interesting that Nightwing takes that leave of absence and talks to Aqualad about how things have kind of, this whole thing with the team started out with him and Wally and going to and rescuing Superboy. It's where it all came from. And now that Wally's gone, he needs that break. But another thing that's coming full circle, if you remember the early episodes, is the team, particularly Roy, was really upset that they were just basically going to be allowed to hang out in the Justice League's library and gym. Now here we come around, the team has proven themselves, and the Justice League grant them full access to the Watchtower. Say that, essentially, that while you are younger than we are, we consider you to be our equals. And, when you're growing up, for most people, there's a moment in your life when you realize that you've become accepted as another adult in the family. I mean, for me, it happened when my grandmother died when I was 19. And that was a really hard time for my family, understandably. But I noticed during that time that the way, my father and my grandfather, the way they spoke to me, it was different than how it had been before. And ultimately, it took me a little while to even realize that I was now considered another adult in the family. And so even though it was a terribly tragic time, that that really made me feel very proud and very, very happy. That I had earned their respect that way. And I kind of think that given everything that's going on right now, that's probably a feeling that's going on in a lot of the team. But just like that time, bad times pass, and there's always hope on the horizon. There's still hope that maybe someday the show will come back. As I said, I'm not going to be holding my breath. But even if it doesn't, that doesn't mean that we're never going to see another really cool DC animated series again. I mean, heck, there's another one. Well, we don't know that it's going to be great, but there's at least another show on the way, Beware the Batman. And, well, let's be honest here. DC has a pretty good tendency to keep DC characters in animated form on the air. So who knows what we'll see down the road. Maybe another Justice League show, maybe another reinterpretation of Teen Titans. Oh wait, I'm sorry, there's already more Teen Titans on the air. So as sad as it is to leave this particular incarnation of some characters that we've all become very fond of, it's not as if these characters, it's not as if they're going away forever. They'll always be out there in some form or another. I remember somebody asked Alan Moore of V for Vendetta, From Hell, and so many other great stories, what he thought about the changes that had made to his stories for the movies. And he said, well, what are you talking about? And he pointed to his bookshelf and said, the stories I wrote are right over there. So, even if this show ends, even if we see a future interpretations of these characters that we don't care for or are good but just aren't the same as what we're used to from these guys, it doesn't mean that all the good things and all the fun things and all the general good times that we've had watching this show, it doesn't invalidate them. It doesn't make them go away. I don't feel as if the time I've spent watching these episodes was for naught. I mean, just because a show got canceled? I mean, treating it like that is really kind of ridiculous. So, it is sad to see a good show go off the air like this. But, given all the dreck that's on TV, I'll take 2 seasons of a really good TV show any day. And especially if it's a show as good as Young Justice was. And with that said, folks, we're going to wrap it up here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Who's Your Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.